Council meeting. As we begin today's meeting, we would like to acknowledge that we are here gathering today on the treaty territory of the Mississauga of the First Credit Nation, and before them the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Huron, and Wendat. We also acknowledge the many First Nation, Métis, Inuit, and other global indigenous people that now call Brampton their home. We are honored to live, work, and enjoy this land. Will you all please now rise for the singing of the national anthem to be followed by a moment of personal reflection.
True patriot love in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true North, strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you. Welcome to our regular council meeting of February 20th, 2019. All members are here with the exception of Councilman Deros, who I'm sure will be joining us earlier, and Mayor Brown is away on vacation. Members of council, there are a few changes identified on the package in front of you. I will ask the city clerk to review the changes for today's agenda since its publication last Friday.
Mr. Acting Mayor, members of council, members of the public attending today, these are the changes to today's agenda. The following items were listed for distribution prior to the meeting and are on members' desks this morning. Item 10.3, minutes from the Governance and Council Operations Committee meeting of last Tuesday, February 12th. Item 10.4, minutes of the Committee of Council meeting of last Wednesday, February 13th. And a briefing report, item 18.1, from the Office of the Chief Administrative Officer regarding various government relations matters. In addition, in regard to item 10.4 on today's agenda, which are the minutes of the Committee of Council meeting of February 13th, and in particular item 6.3.2 regarding the Brampton Arts Coalition Committee matter that was discussed last week at committee, there are some delegations today. In regard to delegation 6.1, which were listed on the agenda when it was published last week, there is a revised delegation form and presentation on members' desks this morning, and there is an added delegation which will be identified as 6.1-3 from Charles Scott, former chair, Brampton Arts and Culture Panel. And as well, in regard to item 10.4, the Committee of Council minutes from last week, specifically in regard to recommendation CW 080-2019, Institute for a Sustainable Brampton, there is correspondence item 12.1 from Janet Moore, the President and Vice Chancellor, Sheridan College, dated February 12th in regard to this matter, and those are the changes, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Dillon.
Of the agenda? Where's the approval, right?
Yes. Do you want to add?
I want to add something to consent.
You want to add something to consent?
Yeah.
We're not there yet. This is for the additions or changes or deletions to the agenda. Councillor Fortini?
I think there was an error here on 10.11 and 10.3.
Yep, through you, Mr. Chair, the councilor correctly pointed out that the minutes from the Governance and Council Operations Committee, which are identified as 10.3 on the agenda, the minutes themselves that were distributed this morning identified it as 10.1, so it will be corrected for the version that's the official version and the version posted online.
So it's 10.3.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion for approval of the agenda, moved by Councillor Dillon, seconded by Councillor Fortini. All in favor? Oh, that carries. I think, are you on the board for the consent, Councillor Dillon? Okay. Mr. Dillon. Okay, we're now at the point of declaration of conflicts of interest. Do any members have a declaration of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act for any matter to be considered on today's agenda? Are you on the board, Councillor Dillon? No?
No, okay, for consent.
Seeing none, do I approve the culprit matter of that one? Adoption of the minutes. We are now to move to the next item on public business on today's agenda, item 3, minutes. We have the following council minutes before us today, 3.1 minutes of City Council regular meeting, February 6, 2019. I have a motion from Councillor Dillon, moved by Councillor Fortini, to approve the minutes as printed and circulated. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. Now, Councillor Dillon. The items listed with an asterisk on the agenda are considered to be routine and non-controversial. A consent motion is to adopt this matter on today's agenda without the need for a separate discussion on the item, unless a member requests a separate discussion. Does any member wish to add an item or remove an item from the consent motion on the agenda? Councillor Dillon.
Yeah, I'd like to add 10.4 to consent.
10.4 is the Committee of Council meetings. I will refer to the clerk to see if this is common practice.
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's not practice. Technically, it's possible for any member to request to add an item that's not on consent to the consent motion. It has not been the practice of this council to add the minutes through committee reports to the consent motion. And this is such that it allows the committee section chairs to actually reflect on the matters that were discussed at committee last week, and for council to reflect on the recommendations from committee and determine if those are appropriate or amendments are necessary. But it is the will of council if they wish to add it to consent.
Are you speaking to Councillor Dillon's? Can we wait to hear the rest of the? Councillor Bowman.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Mayor. 10.4, the minutes, did they also not include part of the Arts Council discussion, which is being delegated today as well?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct. That's the reason why the delegations today are permitted.
So if we put this in consent, does that mean none of the delegations will be speaking?
Through you, Mr. Chair, technically, if the item has been dealt with, approval through consent, then the purpose for which the delegation is here, there isn't a purpose. Yes, you are correct.
Okay, no, I would prefer to hear the delegations.
Fair enough, I'll remove
Okay.
the request.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I have a motion from Councillor Dillon. This is the consent one, isn't it? No, sorry. Do we have a thing for the consent or do we need it? There's no motion for the consent. There's the approval of the agenda. Oh, there's, sorry. We have a motion from Councillor Dillon, seconded by Councillor Genie to approve the consent agenda. All in favor? Can I see some hands? Hasn't passed yet. Okay, thank you. Attention, folks. We're at the part of the agenda with announcements. We have one announcement, 5.1. It's the proclamation National Flag Day of Canada to be proclaimed by Deborah E. James, Brampton resident. On behalf of the Mayor and Council, I will now read part of the proclamation, which was presented to Deborah James, a Brampton resident. Is Deborah here? Don't know if Deborah's here. Most of us were at the flag raising. Since Deborah's not here, we can skip this part, and we can make sure that she gets the proclamation. We had it on last Friday, and we declared that February 15th, 2019 is National Flag Day. So on behalf of the Mayor, Patrick Brown, we do hereby proclaim the day, February 15th, 2019, as National Flag Day of Canada in the city of Brampton. Okay, the next point is 6.1. Today we have its delegations on intern support for the arts organization in Brampton. Today we have delegations from Sharon Van Drish and Reagan Hayward, and I believe Chuck Scott was added to the item. There's currently no recommendation from the Committee on Council on this matter, but we welcome Sharon and Reagan and Chuck. You have 5 minutes for your delegations. Please come forward. Oh, Councilor Vicente, do you want us? Councilor Vicente.
Mr. Chair, would it be possible for us to allow this delegation additional time?
All in favor of giving time? Sure, carries.
Right.
Floor is yours.
Thank you, thank you. I am Sharon Vandrish, and with me today is our task force made up of myself, David Harmsworth, Reagan Hayward, and Chuck Scott. We are the Brampton Arts Coalition Committee, and that is an organization that is made up of the arts organizations in Brampton that you see before you on this slide. Although some of them are represented here today, not all of them could make it, but they have all had input in this presentation here today. 5 years ago, we had an arts council that had approximately 41 members, and then additional individual members, a member meaning a group. Today, 15 of those groups have formed this coalition. There are others that are still out there that have survived the last 5 years, but more than 50% of the organizations in the Arts Council that existed 5 years ago no longer exist. I know you all received a letter from us with the signatures of all the groups in the coalition, and we're here to talk to you today about supporting the arts going forward. We've been meeting since January 30th. We are an arts organization that's passionate arts leaders representing 14 groups in Brampton that have long established existence in the arts community. We've actually created a website at artsbrampton.org, and we have democratically elected a chair and a vice chair. Looking at the definition of an arts council in Wikipedia, because I know there's been some discussion as to what an arts council does. It is a government or private nonprofit organization dedicated to promoting the arts, mainly by funding local artists, awarding prizes, and organizing arts events. They often operate at arm's length from the government to prevent political interference in their decisions. The Arts Council that was in place 4 years ago used to provide a lot of these services to artists in our community. There were newsletters, there were performance opportunities, member services, flow-through funding, resources, publicity opportunities, promotional opportunities, arts in the open, fundraising, many services that were provided our artists at that time. Actually, this is a bit, there's a slide missing. Go back, did I skip it? There we go. This is actually content from the Arts Council website 4 years ago. As you can see, there was a vibrant calendar of events. There was a directory of members groups, which included literary, performing arts, visual arts, and other affiliate groups. We had arts in the open. We had networking opportunities with the Board of Trade, and many opportunities for us to share and our arts with our community. There's another slide in here. What do most arts councils do? We looked at all the models across Canada, and these 7 pillars represent what most of the arts councils do. So they invest in the artistic talent in their community, they create opportunity for public access, they advocate on behalf of the city's artists, they collaborate through arts foundations to increase resources for artists, they support cultural diversity and equity in the arts, they connect artists with one another in communities within the arts, and they celebrate artists' achievements and the communities that they come from. How do we compare in terms of the spend per capita and the various models that exist in cities across Canada that are reflective of a similar population? There's none that's exactly the same, but as you can see here, we're looking at the city of Mississauga, for example, their population, the per capita spend on the arts, and then their Arts Council model. This is what is in place right now. As you can see, some cities are smaller with a staff of 4, 17 directors, all the way down to Montreal, which has a staff of 31 and 23 board members. This data was taken from the same Hill Strategies report that was referenced in the culture plan in terms of dollars. There was some cities that were missed, and looking at equivalent studies, we were able to find the per capita spend on the arts. As you can see, Brampton is quite behind in terms of spending and support for the arts. What other cities are doing? I grabbed the screen captures from those various cities, and you can see that Mississauga's front and center with some of their programming. Hamilton lists over 2,000 arts events that are happening throughout the city in the year, divided by discipline. The grants program is within the Arts Council's mandate in the Toronto Arts Council. Edmonton's got a variety of networking opportunities. Montreal has a list of many partners and sponsors that are supporting the arts in their community. 8 months ago, I stood in this room where council voted unanimously to support the master plan. Further to that, there was a dedication of $372,000 to assist in the arts, the implementation of the Arts and Culture Master Services. And a week later, I understand from the minutes that a further $1,002,000 was allocated to the arts. That's $1.3 million that needs to be allocated to the arts as planned. Our ask today is we seek council approval to designate an interim task force to develop and propose an arts model best suited to the Brampton arts community comprised of those arts leaders. We put together a typical or proposed timeline. Obviously, the speed at which anything is approved or moves through the process would change this, but essentially we are looking that we have a task force appointed in the near future. We spend some time doing a discovery phase looking at the various models in conjunction with City Council and the city staff, that we possibly look at some urgent funding in the interim, as there are some arts groups that will cease to exist if interim funding isn't available to them in the next 90 to 180 days. We would solicit the additional membership to our organization so that we would have a larger membership base in which to form a nonprofit organization, have an AGM, elect a board of governance, and then begin to interview potential model hires for the new Arts Council that we were hoping to be in place by budget time at the end of this year. Next slide. This is the last slide. I think I probably did it pretty close to 5 minutes, but maybe not. So we wanted you to consider the BACC chair appointed leaders as task force primaries. Those two elected individuals are myself and Dave Harmsworth. We wanted you to recognize the BACC as interim Arts Council members, appoint or designate. I'm not sure how council is allocated to the arts. I understand that it does fall under Mr. Councillor Vicente's domain. Assign city staff to liaise with us. But essentially, we're here to ask you to start now. It's been 8 months. We're still here, but not all of us are in a good position to continue to be here, and we seek your support and guidance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Were the other two going to speak, or
Pardon me?
were the other two going to speak?
No, they were not.
They're not. I think, Chuck, did you want Mr. Scott to speak before the questions, or? Okay, come on up, Chuck.
I basically came to speak to you about the fact that we need to reboot the arts in Brampton. The group that we've been working with, the BACC, are ready and prepared to go forward with this. I think Brampton has always seen arts as a backwater, I believe. Being a professional artist and living in Brampton since 1968. I think that it's time, and this council has an opportunity to reboot the arts, to connect our diverse community and make the arts a pillar of economic development, because arts and culture are an economic driver in every community around the world. I've had the experience to travel an incredible amount in my job as a filmmaker, and I think it's time that our city. Last year, our CAO and our budget director got up and called our city a world-class city. You cannot be a world-class city with arts and culture. We have a terrible record for arts and culture in Brampton, and I think it's important, as a new council, you have the opportunity to change that 44-year record of not supporting the arts. There's an opportunity here for you to change that and to make Brampton a world-class city. So I just wanted to say that and add that to the presentation that Sharon. There are a number of these groups that are in a precarious position, and they need financing, investment in them to go forward. They provide arts education to young children in the Rosebuds and in the BMT's Young Theatre Program. So these are really important groups. In the last few years, we've had some successes with the Fold Festival. We've had successes with Be Jazzed. And that's because you supported those organizations. You need to support all of the arts, and it's a really important thing. And that's really what I came here to say today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We have a number of speakers here. Councillor Santos.
Thank you, through you, Chair. So thank you, Sharon, and all of our artists who are here today to bring forward a summary presentation of what was presented to us last Sunday with the Mayor. I also wanted to just say thank you to all of the artists who participated last night at the vigil. What we saw last night is a demonstration of why artists are so important, part of the reason why artists are so important to a city and bringing a community together. We are certainly on a new journey when it comes to arts in Brampton. And so I'm going to very quickly ask all the artists to stand up, just so that council can see who you are. All the artists, please stand up. This is, and I know that some of the folks who are here aren't necessarily part of the 14 groups that, are part of the coalition. And it would be great to make sure that everyone interacts with each other, because we are a growing arts community and we need to make sure we include everybody in the conversation as we move forward on this new journey. So thank you very much for coming, everyone, today. We have Carmen Spada, Tamar Zidane, JL Richardson, among the others who are here today as well. One of the things that, as we move forward in developing what will be an arm's length organization in the arts, is to make sure that it is in alignment, and the way we proceed is it's in alignment with the Arts and Culture Master Plan. I know that tremendous work was done to engage the entire city on that plan. Everyone is on the same page when it comes to that plan. So with the task force moving forward, let's make sure that the task force that is involved is also consistent with the recommendations of the Arts and Culture Master Plan. And we can see from other jurisdictions around the entire province, around the other world, in Montreal, in Hamilton, in Toronto, how amazing their arts organizations are doing. And I think we also have Carmen in the back, who also provided some correspondence to us, signaling that we also have to look at different ways of funding the arts in the city, whether that's through sponsorship or other opportunities that are different from what we've done in the past. So I bring all of those comments forward, and I will ask that the delegation be referred to staff in consideration of the task force and how they are going to be proceeding forward consistent with the recommendations in the Arts and Culture Master Plan. So thank you, everyone, for coming today.
Thank you, Councilor Santos. Councilor Medeiros.
Thank you, through the chair. I guess to the delegations, I support certainly the direction and the intent. I think when we look back on when we made the original choice at the time in 2014, and I agree there's been frustration regarding the void that was left, and I know staff has been working diligently to fill that. One of the compelling arguments for me at the time was the equity issue, is engaging with those groups who normally are not engaged with City Hall, and specifically around the ethno-cultural groups. So if you look at, for example, artists that we encounter when you go to the Tamil community, when you go to the Portuguese community, when you go to different ethnic groups, and they never had that window into government. They never had that ties into City Hall. And when we develop this Arts Council and go away, how do we ensure that we're engaging with these community groups that we traditionally never engage with, to ensure that there's equity across? Because I think at the time, and through the chair, it seemed when you looked at a 20-year reference, it was the same groups always received the same supports. And be it with sports, be it with, and part of, I guess my rationale at the time was to really open up. So if you could maybe comment on what type of outreach that we're going to do to ensure that we're engaging with other groups and other communities that normally are not represented here at the city.
Good morning, everyone. Regan Hayward. Great question, great comment, Councillor Medeiros. I think one of the contributing factors of the disbanding of the old Brampton Arts Council was that it maybe wasn't moving at the growth that Brampton was growing in. To your point of outreach opportunities to our diverse communities in Brampton, I think that there is some really creative, collaborative ways that are coming through our discussions at the coalition level. There is definitely, we've recognized that we want to do that outreach. I think that was a big initiative for putting the website together of what the coalition stands for and what it's there to do. It's sort of, the idea is that for those artists in the various communities in Brampton, that they can reach a platform that is all-encompassing for the arts in general, and that's what that coalition website is welcoming. So as we said in this presentation, to recognize the Brampton Art Coalition Committee as sort of an interim section of Brampton Arts Council members. So the idea is that we want to welcome and bring everyone together through this process, so by the time we have a new Arts Council erected, we have some representation from all those various groups that are existing here in Brampton.
And I guess through the chair, and I guess that would be part of when there's a report back, when we get into its maturity of the Brampton Arts Council.
Sure.
That would be certainly a performance measure that I would personally like to evaluate. I think also through the chair, and this is maybe necessary to staff, is to avoid the duplication when it comes to our grants process. Because I know the community grants that we provide, which I've heard from certain community groups is still cumbersome, it's still difficult, and a lot of them are in the arts area.
Right.
We want to ensure there's no duplication. So I think that's be part of the direction that, that staff work with, I guess, the Brampton Arts Council or Coalition. And I'm not sure if that's a budget discussion, and I'll leave that to our city manager, to avoid that there's two pots funding the same thing in the community.
For sure.
So we want to avoid that duplication. So is this something that we would refer to a budget, or is this something for direction? I don't know if to staff, if they can maybe comment.
Through the chair, this is something that through the referred matter that's been put forward, we can identify any aspects that have been part of the budget process, and so that through that report back, as well as through the budget process, council will be kept well informed and allowed to give us additional direction.
Okay, and I guess through the chair, I would request then, when we get a report back on the coalition going into the Brampton Arts Council, its alignment with the, our arts plan, that we also look at all the funding that exists to the arts community, so ensure that it's being channeled through this council or coalition.
Through the chair, I think that has to happen.
Yeah,
There's a
okay.
number of different competing interests for the same dollars, so I think we have to be as efficient and effective as possible at looking at all those different sources and those requiring funding to ensure that there's no overlap and duplication.
Okay. And I guess lastly, through the chair, I know this council, when we made the decision, we went through a consultant, we struck a consultative body and so on, and we were sort of, and I guess today is a response to our timeliness. And I know there was that frustration during last council that we, as the arts community, is speaking to. How are we going to ensure that this all comes together? So this group gets the support, there's the alignment, so the work that we've done already, so staff are going to be engaged to push this forward.
Thank you. Through the chair, thank you, Councillor Medeiros. Our team is ready to engage with the delegation and ensure that we bring back a report that aligns with the economic development or the cultural master plan and in a very timely manner.
Yeah, and through the chair, and I guess if you can address the duplication after in terms of the funding pots that we have for arts. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Councilor Vicente.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, if I could ask the delegation just to answer a question. In your presentation, you talked about the number of groups that over the past 4 years have not been able to survive and are now either shut down or defunct. You talked about the precarious position of the groups that are remaining. Could you expand on your thoughts on interim funding, as you mentioned in your presentation? What is it that, can you just talk about that and how important that is?
Certainly. So we actually solicited the groups that are participating, and there are, to your point, some that are not on board with us at this time, but we look forward to them joining us. But we asked for their urgent needs, as in, what would you need in the next 3 to 6 months that if you didn't have, you would join the ranks of the organizations that are no longer here? We lost, as you know, Peel Panto Players last year, and the Festival Singers is actually probably the next one that's circling the drain at this time. And so there aren't very many that are in that precarious situation, but we would need to bring forward some urgent funding. And it's for things like funding their musical director and the rehearsal pianist. It's not frivolous funding or of any kind. It's not operating. It's more in the sense of creating the art. I know the concert band as well is in a similar situation that is more urgent than others. So we would bring forward those urgent requests, short-term funding, with hopes that it could circumvent the grant process, which has now closed. So if anything isn't happening through that process, they have another venue in which to seek some stopgap funding to get us to the end of the year where we're looking at a bigger picture in terms of arts funding. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Now, in your presentation, you talked about how you see this requiring approximately 6 months for as a potential timeline. Can these groups not survive the next 6 months
Some of
without
them-
support from the city?
They won't. That's correct.
Okay, so to staff, given that in the past this council has allocated over $1 million for arts panel and arts groups, what mechanisms do we have now in order to be able to provide support in the interim?
Sorry. Through the chair, thank you, Councillor. Our team will look into this and get back to you on what we can do in the interim as part of the report that we bring back.
All right, and so, but just going back to the idea that,
Thought we were
you
done.
know, it's really precarious.
Yes, an
that's a-
organization is about to cancel their March concert. Like, it's not something that,
Their March concert.
correct.
So again, is there do we have a mechanism within council, in order to, on an interim basis, to provide support for those groups or those organizations that are really at risk of not being able to survive a 6-month period, given that it will take time for staff to come back with a report?
If I may, through the chair, I appreciate where this is coming from. However, again, it's difficult to make those type, or identify those types of steps without going back and doing our due diligence as council to assess what options, opportunities, and funding is actually available to provide that type of support, and rationale for that type of support, given that there's a number of different competing precarious interests across the city. So I think to the acting director's comment about giving us the opportunity to come back, I think that is the fairest and best way to protect the city's interests and giving council the best advice to act on that.
Thank you, Seth.
Oh, sorry, Councilor Williams.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Just to clarify, because I just want to understand, you want to create the task force first, and then create what will look like an Arts Council out of the recommendations from staff. Is that what we're looking to do?
The task force, we really kind of need to be officially designated as
Right.
having the mandate to come back with a model. We are a group of 14 organizations, which we hope by the time we start this process even more, we would work with City Council and staff to collaborate together. As arts leaders, we believe we know what the arts need in Brampton, so we would certainly lead that initiative. So it would be a collaboration of the arts leaders and city staff and council.
Sorry, the task force is going to be a collaboration, or what? Because I know the end result may be to have some type of advisory steering committee or a body, right? But for the interim right now, in order to create that body, we're just you have created the task force of 3 people. Or 4 people.
Right, to
That
lead.
is going to work with staff. Okay.
Right.
So first task force, then you'll have a larger council.
Because there's really
outside of
nothing
that.
to create, we don't know what we're going to create until we've done our due diligence as well,
right.
in terms of looking at the various models. So bringing forward anything other than a task force, steering committee
Right.
leadership would probably be premature.
Okay. And the future plan is to have it's through the terms of reference, to have a staff, a council member on that committee in the future? Is that going to be one of the?
I think it's arm's length.
Typically, if we look
Arm's
back at,
length, okay.
sorry, was that a question for me or to each other?
For clarification, I'm just wondering what the.
There
future
is
plans-
typically a council designated to be the liaison from an arts council to city council. There is usually,
Yeah.
so I'm not sure, I'm not familiar with the process of how that's determined, but there usually is,
Okay.
who would then liaise with the leaders in the arts community.
Okay, so that may be something to hope for in the
Yes,
future.
absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Williams. Councilor Bowman.
Thank you very much, through you, Mr. Acting Mayor. Just a couple of questions. The first one is Al. Yes, you, Al. I'm just looking at this chart that says we spend $0 per capita on the arts. I find it difficult to believe that we spend $0 with,
It's less than zero.
it's less than zero.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it's less than $1, sorry.
Less than $1. I thought we had below market rents for some areas that we give practice time and space. Is that not accumulated? Do we not keep any type of dollar figure for that amount?
Sorry, we're taking turns here.
Well,
Apologize.
I'll let Reagan speak first and then we'll hear from Al.
So the question is in identifying any gifts in kind that the city of Brampton would have given to arts groups or artists, is that correct?
Yep.
Yes, in fact, that has happened. I think with this chart in particular, the numbers were extrapolated from the Hills consulting firm, and it was primarily based on comparison points to what other municipalities are doing on giving base funding, solidary funding, and through financial measure, not necessarily gift in kind.
Okay. Okay,
Does that
thank you.
answer?
But Al, we do gifts in kind, correct?
Through the chair, I think historically, we have not done a good enough job in terms of communicating and demonstrating how much support we provide to various groups. I would hope that as the report comes back, we will be able to demonstrate to council and to the public in terms of how much we've actually have supported over the years. And as part of a comprehensive plan moving forward, I'm hoping that we can clearly put something in place so that we have a firm strategy moving forward for the next 4 to 10 years, hopefully, in terms of where we're moving. I think council will hear a little bit in terms of what we're talking about at our planned council workshop on the 25th as well, in terms of our continuing level of planned support for the arts, with an arts hub model perhaps in the making as well. So historically we've done a lot. We haven't done a good enough job of promoting what we've done.
Okay.
And we can certainly quantify that with the report that'll come back to council.
Okay, thank you. And don't get me wrong, funding for the arts is something I've supported all along. We were in total agreement with the Arts and Culture Master Plan. I think it passed unanimously. So that's not an issue. But the issue for me, Reagan, is just putting forward a chart that says virtually that Brampton's done nothing for the arts when in fact, through other means, not just giving dollars, we've done a fair amount for the arts. So that was my only question about that. So that's not an issue for me. The other comment I had was, I thank Councillor Medeiros for bringing his comment forward about various organizations, various cultures, various demographic groups, and it's not just related to racial demographic groups. It's seniors, seniors
Age.
artists, and a lot of different areas that we're still overlooking as well. So we need to come up with something that includes all of those. So I thank him for bringing that forward, and I hope it will be part of the report that comes forward, but I also support the referral back to staff, so, thank you.
Councillor Singh.
Yeah, I just had I guess a question of clarification surrounding the task force that is being offered by the council to set up. Was there four members we're saying initially the task force should be? And how did that come about? Why did we decide those specific 4 people, as we're talking about engaging other groups and whatnot? Why those 4?
So the Arts Task Force is birthed out of the Brampton Arts Coalition Committee. So the Brampton Arts Coalition Committee, as shown in the slide, where it's comprised of 14 long-established Brampton arts groups.
Okay.
So it was essentially evolved from that original group.
Yeah.
And nominations went forward and elections took place in record timing in order to move forward along with this cultural master plan and with what the city already has in place.
Yeah.
So we recognize that the culture department have things in place, reference to the cultural master plan.
Yeah.
And the coalition committee had decided, well, we want to have the arts community representation to work alongside this city initiative.
Yeah.
And so the Arts Task Force membership was brought forward through that coalition committee.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I
Okay,
get
good.
that. All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Sharon. We have no more speakers, no more questions, so we do have 2 motions here. The first one is to receive the delegation, and it is moved by Councillor Santos, seconded by Councillor Dillon. All in favor to receive the delegation? Thank you. That carries. And the second motion is by Councillor Santos, and I'll read it. I don't know if it's up on the screen, but I'll read it out, that the request from the Brampton Arts Coalition to designate a task force to develop and propose the Arts Council model best suited to the Brampton arts community comprised of arts leaders be referred to staff for consideration. And it was seconded by Councilor Medeiros. All in favor? And that carries. Thank you very much. Our next, 8.1 was in consent. So our next was item 10. We are now at item 10, committee reports or minutes. We have 4 committee reports in the form of minutes on today's agenda. Under council's meeting procedures, the committee or section chair introduces their committee reports or minutes and summarizes the matters considered and now brought forward to council today for ratification. 10.1, Councilor Fortini, you chaired the Citizens Appointment Committee, which met on February 4th. The committee minutes are here for council approval. I now pass the chair to you to lead council in consideration of the committee minutes.
Thank you, through Acting Mayor. Member of council, you got minutes of the Citizen Appointment Committee in front of you. Is there any questions? Don't see nothing, and I'll send it back to you.
Okay. I have moved by Councilor Fortini, seconded by Councilor Palashi, that the minutes of the Citizens Appointment Committee meeting February 4th, 2019 to the council meeting February 20th, 2019 be received. Recommendation CAC 001-2019 to CAC 003 to 2019 be approved as outlined in the subject minutes. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. This one here. 10.2, Council Medeiros, you chaired the Planning and Development Committee meetings which met on February 11th. The committee meetings are here for council approvals. I now pass the chair to you to lead council in consideration of the committee minutes.
Thank you, through you, Acting Chair. Members of council, you have before you the minutes of the Planning and Development Committee. Are there any questions or comments? No, back to you, Mr. Acting Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councilor Medeiros. I have a motion from Councilor Medeiros, seconded by Councilor Santos, that the meetings of the Planning and Development Committee meeting of February 11th, 2019 to the council meeting of February 20th, 2019 be received, and that recommendations PDC 019 to 2019 to PDC 022-2019 be approved as outlined in the subject minutes. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. 10.3, Governance and Council Operations Committee. Councilor Fortini, you chaired the Governance and Council Operations Committee, which met on February 12th. The committee meetings were distributed at the start of today's meeting. I now pass the chair to you to lead council in the consideration of the committee minutes.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. Member of council, you got the Governance and Council Operation Committee minutes in front of you. Let me see any questions. Councilor Bowman.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering, there was, I did attend that meeting. I had to leave a little early. There were 2 motions put forward that carried. However, you are having another meeting Monday, correct?
As far as I know, yes.
Through you, Mr. Chair, there is a meeting scheduled for Monday, February 25th at 2 o'clock, I believe.
Okay, so my question is, is the meeting Monday, will it have anything to do with the 2 motions that carried at the previous meeting that we have the minutes for here? That's all.
Through you, Mr. Chair, right now the draft agenda for Monday's meeting includes 5 items. There were 3 items from the last meeting that are in the minutes before you that were deferred to the next meeting. They dealt with council procedure bylaw and meeting rules. They dealt with accountability and transparency, and they also dealt with a tour of the new council chambers. Those were deferred to the meeting. There was also a matter last week at Committee of Council on printing and mailing for council members that was referred back to the Governance Committee. That's on the agenda. And the 5th item is continuing implementation on the council office support model.
Okay, no, I'm just, particularly I'm looking at the severance payment options. Are we going to be discussing that in the next meeting? Is that going to be an in-camera discussion?
I think, yes, it will be discussed. I think we might have to go in camera for that.
That's correct,
So,
Mr. Chair.
We'll have to go
Thank
for
you.
that.
Yep, that's it.
At the meeting or here? Okay. So,
That would be on Monday at the meeting,
yeah,
correct?
at the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Don't see nothing. Send it back to you for ratification.
Oh, Councilor Palashi has it.
Oh, sorry. Councilor Palashi?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Going back to the severance payments, number 3 here on page 10.1-4, further that council shall reserve the right to hire existing constituency staff under the new political model at any time upon implementation, regardless of any severance payment made to these employees related to their loss of full-time employment status. Is that one of the items that's being discussed at the next governance meeting?
Through you, Mr.
Or if moving the minutes, do we support that going forward?
Through you, Chair Fortini, adopting the minutes today just ratifies that referral of that matter back to staff, and staff plan to address that as one of the items on the council office support model at Monday's meeting.
So you're bringing that back to Monday's meeting at the governance committee? Okay, thank you.
Seen any other questions? I'll send it back to you for verification.
Thank you very much. I have a motion moved by Councillor Fortini that the minutes of the Governance and Council Operations Committee meeting of February 12th, 2019 to the council meeting of February 20th, 2019 be received, and that recommendations GCC 001-2019 to GC 011-2019 be approved and outlined in the subject minutes. All in favor? All in favor? Not enough hands here. All in favor? Thank you. That carries. Pay attention, guys. Okay. We're next at 10.4. The Minutes Committee of Council met on January 30th. The committee minutes are here for council approval. I will now pass the chair to the respective section chairs in order of consideration during the committee meetings to lead council in consideration of the committee recommendations. Councillor Dillon chaired the Economic Development and Culture section. Councillor Singh chaired the Corporate Service section. Councillor Vicente chaired the Public Works and Engineering section. Councillor Santos chaired the Community Services section. Council will then consider a motion to approve the recommendations in its entirety after all chairs have concluded their summaries and any resulting council questions or debates have finished. Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. The minutes are before council. Are there any questions? Councillor Paleshi.
Again, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was trying to find my minutes here. There's a letter here from Sheridan in support of the Institute for Sustainable Brampton. Did we add those to the minutes? This item 12.1?
Yeah.
And did that fall under economic development, that delegation? It did, okay. So staff have taken that. Did staff know that this letter was coming?
Through the chair, I wasn't necessarily aware that this letter was coming, but that item you referred to is on page 4, and that referred matter is coming back to staff to do a report back on the Institute for Sustainable Brampton.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions, pass it back to you for ratification.
Thank you. We'll ratify them all at the end of each chair. Councillor Singh, you chaired Corporate Services section. I pass it to you.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Willens, and members of council. You have in front of you the minutes for corporate services. Are there any questions? Turn. Seeing none, Acting Mayor Willens, I send it back to you for ratification. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Singh. I will now pass the chair to Councillor Vicente, who chaired the Public Works and Engineering section.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. Members of council, you have before you the minutes of the Public Works and Engineering section. Do any members have any questions on the minutes?
Looks like there's two on the board.
Councillor
Bowman.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to follow up on our discussion on the snow clearing. I got to tell you, in the last week, I have had more calls on snow clearing issues than I think in previous 4 years combined. So I think it's really, really important that we move this forward and get a report. I had my assistant send a note, I guess, to you, Bruce, and copy to other people of a list. I think there was 11 people that were complaining. And one of the things that One of the things that was common was that they were being told when they called 311 that it would all be cleaned up within 24 hours. So I think we need to mesh with 311 on this issue and talk to them about the messaging that's going out to residents when they do call in about snow issues.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. We have addressed that with 311. There's obviously some continuing work required to get all of that messaging correct, and we have examined dates for that workshop and are starting to put materials together for that. So.
Okay. And 311 will be included in those workshops?
Absolutely. That's a key component.
Perfect. Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I was actually asking about the workshop. Do we have an idea of when we're going to be having it?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we have, I think there are two potential dates that are in the council calendar. One is mid-April. I don't remember the specific day, and then the next opportunity is in June. If we do the April date, we won't be able to bring the year-end summary report and all of that information to you. So I would recommend the June date, but I look, certainly for feedback from council if you think it's more urgent than that, but we won't have a full picture at that point.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Our next speaker is Councillor Fortini.
Thank you, through the chair. Just a quick one. Are we going to have the contractors? Or more than one, I think, over for this workshop?
Through you, Mr. Chair, certainly that is, council has expressed interest in that, and we will we'll look to that. We're still putting together the outline of all the pieces, but it's certainly a key component since an amount of the clearing is done through contracted services.
Okay. And my last question, when we do this workshop or this report that's coming back, can we look at the roads where there's no sidewalks? Because a lot of the mothers are bringing these kids to school. And I was out this morning, last night at 11:30, 12 o'clock on North Simcoe. You couldn't even drive there, and I took a lot of pictures. It was potholes this big of ice because where it was melted, was it? And they went this morning, I went back there at 5:30. They did send 2 trucks to throw salt everywhere, but there's no sidewalks. So we gotta look at the roads where people could walk and where people have to use the road. So thank you.
Thank you. We'll make sure to include that.
Thank you, Councillor. Next speaker on the board is Councillor Paleski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Bruce, what workshop are we doing?
Through you, Mr. Chair, at the last meeting, there was a direction to hold a workshop on all of the matters that relate to the way in which we do our snow and ice clearing. From my understanding, the direction would include things like the level of service, the way the service is delivered, the communications protocols, and how we deliver communication and status information in our response, and bring back any previous information for council that the previous council may have made, things like the costs of windrow and local clearing at different levels, and that have all of that information available to council, because you may recall there was a motion to do a complete service review, and council's decision was instead to do a workshop and make sure we're all, I think, on the same page with respect to that, and maybe narrow the scope of any further studies so that it wasn't maybe as broad, so it would be focused on whatever council's interests are at that point.
So maybe if I can, and to maybe hopefully make the workshop a little bit more worthwhile, and add some time to it, because that sounds like it would take place in about an hour. Can we add some summer maintenance to parks and street sweeping, grass cutting? Can we add that in there as well to have a kind of a fulsome discussion?
Serve at the will of council. If that's your desire, we could certainly do that. We could do it as a separate workshop or at the same one, whatever.
The workshop, there wasn't a motion to, it was just a request by council. Correct? There isn't a motion saying that we...
I'm sorry, I looked to the clerk for
to hold a
confirmation.
workshop.
Through you, Mr. Chair, there was a motion introduced at Committee of Council last week. This was an added item, and it was debated, and then subsequently the motion was withdrawn to do the comprehensive review in favor of a workshop to be scheduled. and there was no motion specific to the workshops, but staff are actively planning for the workshop.
So the answer is no?
There is no specific motion.
For a workshop?
No.
So I can request that we include that into our workshop? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Pelletier. Councillor Fortini.
Thank you, through the chair. Forgot one quick question. So when it comes May or April, we start sweeping the roads. A lot of the roads, we use sand and salt mix. And I've noticed in my ward, especially Ward 7, where the roads have been done 3-4 times through the season, and certain areas haven't been done until once a year, or hasn't been done at all. So we can look at part of that workshop, see how the roads are being swept. And as far, we have these contractors, but we have our own machines. Why, I'd like to know in the workshop, why are we not using our own? Instead of always subbing out when we have them parked over there.
So through you, Mr. Chair, we certainly can address that whole cleanup and as I indicated, give information about the allocation of how services delivered, both in-house and contracted, and provide a discussion on that for you.
Our next speaker on the board is Councillor Williams.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I respectfully disagree with combining the two. I think summer maintenance may be another major issue we're going to have to discuss. So I'm wondering if we could keep this workshop strictly for snow and then at a later date have one for summer maintenance. Because I think we, over the summer, we may have calls about that. So just to not confuse things and get a little bit overwhelmed with the content in this snow clearing workshop.
If I can, to you, Mr. Chair, maybe to be helpful to council, what I can do is once we have an outline together of how much material and the topics and that, we can circulate that to council and take some direction from you as to whether you want to split it or combine it.
Good.
Yeah, I'm done. Thanks. Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Fortini.
Thank you for the last time, I appreciate it. To my colleague, so maybe we could do the snow maybe a little bit later, get more for the street, because we do need that like April, May, the snow we have time through the summer, get more of the street cleaning, and what Councillor Pelletier suggested to get that part. And then maybe the snow, we move it up maybe a month after, because we have all summer, all the whole year until the snow comes. Yeah, to not confuse it.
I see no other speakers on the board. Are there any other questions for the minutes of the Public Works and Engineering section? Seeing none, I turn the mic back to you, Acting Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Vicente. Councillor Santos, you chair the Community Services section. I pass the chair to you.
Thank you very much, Acting Mayor. Members of Council, you have before you the minutes of the Community Services section from the Committee of Council meeting last week. Do any members have any questions or comments regarding the minutes? Seeing none, I pass it back to you, Acting Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Santos. I have a motion now, moved by Councillor Santos, seconded by Councillor Dillon, that the minutes of the Committee of Council meeting on February 13th, 2019 to the Council meeting of February 20th, 2019 be received, and that recommendation CW 079-2019 to CW-97-2019 be approved as outlined in the subject minutes. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. And we will move the correspondence 12.1 forward, since it fell under a Committee of Council recommendation. Moved by Councillor Pelletier, seconded by Councillor Bowman, that the correspondence from Janet Morrison, President and Vice Chancellor of Sheridan College, dated February 12, 2019, item 10.4, Committee of Council recommendation CW 0802019, Institute for Sustainable Brampton, be received. All in favor? That carries. Thank you very much. Okay, we are down now to government relations. You have the referred matters list, but we're now going to 18.1, a briefing report. Material was distributed electronically to council yesterday at the CAO's office at the start of today's meeting by the clerk, and I believe we have Ruben. Lowell Vaughn is back. Do any members have questions regarding the information provided? Would anybody like to?
Thank you. Thank you very much, and through you, Acting Chair. Just want to take a few minutes just to go over really quickly 2 points on the GR update. The first is related to tomorrow at Regional Council's Committee Day. One of the committees is their new Strategic Housing and Homelessness Committee. As part of the briefing package, we did provide a briefing note from Planning and Development Services, and this was in response to Council's discussion related to the coldest night of the year event that's taking place on February 23rd, so I did want to make mention of that. And the other point that I wanted to make is staff is still continuing to monitor and engage in the public consultations at the provincial level. Just given timing, staff wanted to propose a recommendation. Next week, there are going to be 2 planning-related proposed submissions that we are going to bring forward. One is related to the growth plan, as well as the Endangered Species Act. And just given, because next week is Committee of Council, we did want to receive Council's endorsement. So as part of the package for next week, you are going to receive the draft submissions. So we do have recommendations that is looking at authorizing for us to make submissions to the province regarding proposed amendments to the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe 2017 and the 10th year review of Ontario's Endangered Species Act discussion paper prior to the February 28, 2019 and March 4, 2019 deadlines respectively, and that staff report back to the Committee of Council meeting of February 27, 2019 with both proposed city submissions. So as part of this GR update, we wanted to make sure that we got that proposed recommendation should a councillor wish to make that. The rest of the GR update just speaks to some of the updates. Yesterday, the legislature did resume, and there are a couple of key items that we are looking for this session. One is on proposed changes that we're expecting related to the healthcare system, in particular as it relates to the LHINs, and I understand that that's going to probably have some effects, or quite a bit effects on healthcare in Brampton, in particular our LHIN, as well as our partnership with William Osler Health Services, as well as we're continuing to monitor the lead up to the provincial budget, as well as obviously we are looking to future discussions on the regional governance review and the makeup of the region appeal in particular. So with that, I'll leave my comments there. Happy to answer any questions and hopefully have a mover for that one recommendation.
Thank you very much, Lowell. We have a number of speakers, and I guess because you're back. Councillor Santos.
Thank you through you, Chair, and I'm happy to move your report and your recommendations. I'm wondering if you could just please give us a highlight of and a summary of the report that was given to us on affordable housing matters.
Thank you. So this was from the Planning and Development Charter. So in short, what the briefing note really talks about, it talks about the steps that the City of Brampton is doing leading up to the Housing Brampton, which is the affordable housing strategy, the first housing affordable strategy for the City of Brampton. It talks about the housing needs. It talks about the housing needs assessment, which was done last June. It speaks to the seniors housing study. It talks about the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee, which is formed in 2018. I believe the next meeting is going to be taking place in March, and I believe Councillors Dillon as well as Medeiros are going to be representatives on that committee. It talks about the student housing policy review, which is a good timing, especially as it relates to the work that we're ongoing doing with Ryerson and potential future of student housing. The rental protection conversion policy review, as well as municipal surplus lands, which is an ongoing process. Obviously, as we look for innovative ways to find affordable housing, having a surplus of lands is an opportunity for us. One of the things that we are trying to do much more, I would like to propose aggressively this year, is seeing how we can tap into the region appeal. I think that's one of the gaps that we've had in the region. The region obviously is the housing service manager as it relates to the affordable, so low affordability. And I think time is now important for us to start leveraging some of the tools and some of the some of the initiatives that the region is going to be embarking on. As in particular, as it relates to any of the rent subsidies that they're doing, how can we start to leverage the city? How can the city start to leverage the region appeal a little bit more? And then the rest of the note really talks about what the region appeal is going to be discussing tomorrow at the strategic housing and homelessness. This speaks to their 10-year housing and homelessness strategy. It speaks to the housing wait list. What we've been doing over the last couple of months is making sure that we can kind of provide the city of Brampton specific stats. So in terms of what is the housing affordability need for the city of Brampton. So we try to provide you with some of those statistics as well.
Just a follow-up question, sorry. In all of this, the committees and what's happening at the region, et cetera, is there a discussion about basement apartments and the challenge around that because of lack of affordable housing?
Through the acting mayor, I'd probably defer that maybe to the acting commissioner for that specific question.
Thank you, Lowell. Through you, Chair. Councillor, I actually posed that question myself yesterday to see if there was the possibility to link into and leverage the number of second units that the City of Brampton has been registering to tap into that as a supply of affordable housing for the residents. I know that in 2018 we issued close to 1,500 permits for second units, which is substantially higher than any other type of affordable housing that went out the door in 2018. So I do think there is potential to leverage that asset in the city for affordable housing. So we'll be exploring that.
Okay, thank you. And so I'm just going to emphasize that, while basement apartments in the market, in the housing market has been the more affordable option, and we're seeing many more residents converting their houses to accommodate more units for tenants. I think unless we start moving quickly on building proper affordable housing units for the growth that's coming to Brampton, whether that's driven by the university or the population growth targets from the province. We have to be quick. Otherwise, the issues around basement apartments and illegal, some of the challenges for us are illegal basement apartments and units that we don't have control over, and that it's very difficult for us to enforce. And it causes other issues related to parking on streets, parking on driveways, neighbors who are unhappy with the state of properties, etc. So I think we need to make sure that that is put into this discussion around affordable housing when we go to the region or when we discuss it at our own, with our strategy moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Santos. Councillor Williams.
Thank you. Through you, Acting Mayor. I'm noticing a lot of the numbers are combined, and what you said recently that you're looking to get Brampton-specific statistics.
Through the acting mayor, in briefing notes that we've done for the Big City Mayors Caucus in our last year's AMO, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, we did have specific City of Brampton numbers. If it's not included in this note, I'll make sure that I can recirculate that to council so you see where we have the data broken down by City of Brampton. And then also maybe, if you haven't had a chance yet to review it, is the housing the housing assessment needs is also a fairly good document that speaks to the specific unique characteristics of the housing makeup in the City of Brampton, that speaks to the multi-generational, multi-family homes and the larger homes that are required for the city. So I can circulate that to all of council.
Okay, that would be helpful. I'm also looking at the shelters. It's 13,519 visits, and do we know how many of those visits were Brampton residents?
Through the acting mayor, I'm going to say I believe so, but I'll circulate the numbers because we do have it broken down by the shelters as well as what the City of Brampton residents' housing wait list is. So I can make sure that we circulate that out to council.
Okay, so we can get specific numbers on the amount of Brampton residents who are accessing shelters in Peel.
And we also have the need and what is required going forward, so.
What is required
and
going
unfortunately, they have been going up, the trend has been upwards, unfortunately.
Absolutely. I'm wondering about the capital for the permanent youth shelter. Is there a plan moving forward for the region to start looking for a location, building, and so on and so forth?
Through the
tenure.
acting mayor, I'd have to get back to you on that in particular. I know it has been a discussion at regional council, but let me follow up with them to see specifically where it's at.
Okay, so we don't know who we're partnering with for that. I'm also asking if it's going to have a similar look to Peel Youth Village. Is that kind of like the direction we're going for here?
In all
Brampton?
honesty, I'm not as familiar on this particular file, so let me go back and then I can provide a more fulsome update to yourself and council.
All right, that'd be great. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Williams. Councilor Bowman.
Through you, Mr. Acting Mayor. I thought I was losing weight. Did you hear that? Anyways, I just want to follow up on Councilor Santos's comments as well about the basement apartments. And you know, Rick, I've been harping on this for 4 years now. And it's you know, it's a lot of issues. It's the coverage of the lawns, it's the trash, it's the sewer usage, it's the traffic patterns, it's the density requirements that we built our small streets and houses on, and it's a tax issue, basically. I mean, you know, there's a lot of illegal basement apartments where we're not getting any tax revenue at all for the city for the use of the services that we offer. So it is very, very important that we move ahead as quickly as possible with legal second units, and I understand the response to making fully legal second units is fantastic. But again, there's other considerations we've got to look at is, you know, can those areas sustain second units in every second house on those streets? So as long as you can put that in with whatever reports you're doing.
Through you, Acting Mayor. Yes, Councillor, you're right, the struggle is very real for the city on many aspects of the second units. You know, we are bringing a report fairly soon to council about streamlining the registration process, and that will, again, make it easier for those who want to go through, you know, the correct avenues to make a legal second unit. That doesn't necessarily alleviate the pressures on the city with respect to, as you said, the infrastructure that was put in place. We've had various discussions with the region with respect to water and sewer, and they have built in you know, additional capacity in anticipation of intensification in most cases. But then there's added pressures to the transit system, to the libraries, to the community centers, all very relevant points. And one that we will continue to lobby the provincial government for changes to help us, you know, recover some of those costs. But in the interim, our hands are somewhat tied with respect to what tools we have in the toolbox to get additional revenue from these units. But we will continue down that path, absolutely.
Thank you. And would it be of any value to have the school trustees involved? Since I know that there's a big impact on some of the schools in certain areas as well that find out they've got an additional 150 students upon registration. So,
thank you, Councillor. I'm sure it wouldn't hurt the cause.
Okay, thank you very much. And just a very quick question, Lowell, nothing to do with your report, but we had a visit from our premier on Saturday, and I guess Joe, you had sent us out a message on Friday to that effect. Do we get any more than a day's notice that dignitaries like that are coming to the city so we can have a nice welcoming party for them, or?
Through the acting mayor, the short answer is typically not. And a lot of it has to do for security-related questions. So we've had visits with the Prime Minister, and staff may be alerted 1 or 2 days, but again, you know, we're embargoed just because of the security concerns. And the same thing would apply for the Premier and any other high dignitary as well. So we're we learn pretty much as when council learns. So.
Okay, because it looked like, from the pictures I saw, it looks like he was walking around pretty free and easy down at Gage Park, I don't think he was too concerned about secure. Oh, Al's going, oh, there was? They just weren't in the picture. It's not like our security guys who are everywhere all the time, and we know they're there because they do such a great job. Thank you.
And through the acting mayor, not to extend the answer a little bit, but as normal protocol, when we do learn of either dignitaries or MPs or MPPs or if ministers are coming in, we do work with their staff, our MPs, MPP staff, and we do alert council as soon as we learn that an event is taking place. Because again, I believe even though that they don't necessarily consider this, I think that it's important for council to be aware and if you are available to participate when you can.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bowman. Councillor Frattini.
Thank you, through acting mayor. Thank you, Rick, for bringing that up for the infrastructure. I've been always saying that there's a lot of areas where we don't have a storm sewer and a sanitary. It's all in one, and it's causing a lot of problems, especially in the older area of Bramalea and other parts of Peel Village. Going back to the basement apartments. So I've been saying this for a long time. We have this Airbnb that's taken over a lot of our housing. So a lot of the residents are saying, why am I renting my house out or something when I could rent it to Airbnb? And it's causing a lot of problems to the neighbors because they rent it like Friday, Saturday, and leave Sunday. They put the garbage out when it's not the right time. They don't recycle because they're not from here. A lot of parties and stuff in people's backyards. The other people can't enjoy their backyards. So I know, like we talked about it many times, and I know Mississauga put a bylaw saying that you cannot rent your house less than
Councillor
26
Martini,
days.
sorry, I need to interject here, because Airbnbs aren't really related to the housing report, but
Well, it's
maybe,
part of the
maybe,
hou- it's
maybe
part of the
some,
basements because
maybe something
it's
we
a
should,
shortage of housing because people are renting mostly to Airbnb
Yeah.
because that's why we have the shortage. They don't want
maybe,
to rent it out to
maybe,
Airbnb.
maybe Lowell could look into that and
So,
bring back in a
can we
future report.
Look into that too, please.
Thank you, Councillor Frattini. Councillor Medeiros.
Thank you, Lowell. I will be attending tomorrow's committee meeting. When you look at issues of housing, and I heard basement apartments, and I hear staff are dealing with the provincial government regarding or trying to advocate, it seems there's a lot of advocacy work around the table. And it seems that there seems to be a lot of impetus to do full-blown out campaigns on all these issues that we have here at the city. So I'm just wondering, is there any way that we can package something together? At Peel was very effective at the fair share advocacy and branding that through United Way, ensuring getting our fair share. One of the struggles that we had through the chair was the data. The data wasn't so updated. Now we're dealing with issues around basement apartments. I hear housing, which combined. I know we go off on other areas of impact to the city. And when you look at our advocacy, I think our advocacy is, and again, maybe it's not related, it just seems to be everywhere right now. We have advocacy here, we want to set up, advocacy here in this area. And how do we bring everything tight and put together and effectively deal with the government? So when we hear staff are dealing with the province, because I know when I meet with my provincial counterparts, and I have one coming up on Friday, and it's exactly, I'm dealing with that issue of basement apartments, because residents want to see some change. They're tired of us listening to me about saying that, effectively we don't have the teeth to do A, B, or C, and we have to work with the province and so on. So I guess, and this question would be, how do we scope and be more effective in our advocacy?
Thank you, and through the acting mayor, great question. In an ideal world, it would be anchored through the strategic plan. I think we're very fortunate. We have a great vision 2040. Council, you're working through your council priorities, and that would be a great opportunity to anchor our advocacy. So we're not doing ad hoc advocacy, that we are actually going in with a strategic, systematic way to both the federal, provincial government, and even regional government. So if it's affordable housing, if it's infrastructure, if it's transit, even if it's health, public health, whatever those are, it should be anchored through the strategic plan. And then that gives staff direction, because then we know that it is council endorsed advocacy positions that we can start doing campaigns. One of the things that you'll be getting once the your priorities are finalized is really have a robust discussion around the federal election. Because I'll tell you, affordable housing is such a key piece of that. Infrastructure, public transit, community safety, these are all critical issues. But again, I don't want to come forward with just kind of ad hoc advocacy. I think it needs to be anchored in council's priorities, and that helps us to start to plan systematically over the next year, 2 years, 3 years, and 4 years. And then as the advocacy builds and kind of moves forward, then we can always come back to council. So when you do meet with your MPs, your MPPs, then we're not giving you anything new. It's we've devised the briefing notes, information that you could go take that you're armed with City of Brampton specific. So ideally, it would be anchored through the strat plan. So very shortly, once the strat plan is completed, then we're going to come back very quickly with a government relations or an advocacy plan for council's consideration that would hopefully focus on council's priorities. Understanding that issues do pop up, especially with this provincial government, that we have to be able to react to as well.
And thank you through the chair, and I thank you for your comments, because that's been sort of what I've been trying to, in terms of mantra, and effectively how do we push forth an intergovernmental agenda. And my concern is sometimes is when we get off on different areas that are maybe aligned with our priorities, we sort of dilute the message of what we're trying to say. I will also convey that these notes and the Brampton position is so important, that consistency, that if we really want to be effective, that truly when we go to other levels of government, when we go to the region, that we don't do one thing here, and then we go to the region and our actions and our voting record and everything effectively is really contrary to what corporately and what we're trying to do here at the city. So I think it's so important, these type of notes, and I appreciate, I know tomorrow I will go with a sense of how to ensure that I'm aligning it with the City of Brampton. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Medeiros. Councilor Vicente.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. Councillor Medeiros, you gave me the perfect segue for my question, because we always do talk about advocacy when it comes to creating affordable housing options. But when the discussion always tends to go in that direction, we're always looking up to other levels of government to help in this regard. What is our role as the planners and the builders of the City of Brampton to increase the options that residents have to be able to live, to have an affordable housing option? And so not every solution comes from above. And so what are we doing as a city to increase or incent the development community to build rental units, smaller units? You know, a lot of the new subdivisions, the homes are large and more expensive. And I know we've heard in the past discussions around inclusionary zoning and so forth, but really, we have the opportunity and the ability to really drive development that provides affordable housing options. So while we can continue to do advocacy work, we also should be taking a greater role and doing our own due diligence and, you know, building affordable options. You know, we have in our wards a building about to go up that is all rental, and that's a good story. So how can we see more of that happen across the city? Just a question to staff.
Through you, Acting Mayor. Councillor Vicente, it's that, I think you've touched on a good point. We do have opportunities to work with developers and builders. You use the word incent. How do we incent them to provide that type of a housing, rental unit, for instance? We don't have currently in our regulations the ability to regulate the tenure of a building. So they could propose a high-rise building. It could either be a condominium or it could be a rental. They could decide to rent at or above market value. So those are the types of things that I think need to happen through building relationships with that community to try to see what sort of interest is out there. I haven't had the opportunity yet to sit with many of the developers or the builders to have that discussion. We certainly will be looking at opportunities that are coming, to the city of Brampton in trying to see what level of interest we can gauge in providing that type of housing. So I think at this point, if I could request a little bit of time to come back to you with some ideas and some interest around that type of market, it would be appreciated.
Thank you, Acting Commissioner. So what would staff need in terms of direction from this council for us as a city to prioritize that?
Can I, through you, Acting Mayor, can I come back to you with those requests after I've had an opportunity to have some discussions?
I think so, because I believe that that is something that we all strive to do. And as I mentioned before, we're always looking to the provincial, federal governments.
Yeah.
We have the power also to do a lot of good work around in that area. So I certainly welcome that and look forward to that discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Vicente. Councilor Medeiros, you're back on?
Thank you, through Acting
You're
Mayor.
off.
Just as a chair planning, as a reminder to my colleague, Councilor Vicente, we did pass a resolution at Planning Committee, which was to look at possibly where we can incentivize or provide incentives across the city from a planning perspective. As you would appreciate as well, it's market-driven. So it's how do we provide that? And to remind just my colleague as well, at the region, if you remember, we passed a budget addition of 2 staff members in human services to focus their intention on how do we engage with developers when they build at-market units to include floors of social housing, similar to what we did with the Daniels project at Mississauga Square One. So I think there's a lot of thought process around it, and I thank you for raising it again, but I think more than happy to discuss this at the Planning Committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and seeing no other questions, Lowell, thank you, Lowell, for your report, excellent report again, and thank you to your staff, and thank you to council members for good discussions to a lot of items that are discussed at other levels of government that are very important to Brampton. So thanks again, Lowell. I guess do we need a motion? Yeah, we have 2 motions here. We've got one, the briefing report. It's moved by Councilor Santos, seconded by Councilor Williams, that the briefing report from the Office of the Chief Administrative Officer to Council meeting February 20th, 2019, re Government Relations Matters, Regional Council and Provincial Matters be received. All in favor? Carries, thank you. And the second report is item 18.1, moved by Councilor Bowman, seconded by Councilor Williams, that the staff be authorized to make submissions to the province regarding proposed amendments to the growth plan to the Greater Golden Horseshoe 2017 and the 10-year review of Ontario's Endangered Species Act. Discussion paper prior to the February 28th, 2019 and March 4th, 2019 deadlines respectively, and that staff report back to the Committee of Council meeting on February 27th, 2019 with both proposed city submissions. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is 19, public question period. We now can deal with item 19, public question period, we invite members of the public to come forward to the podium and ask questions about any decision made at council today. There is a 15-minute limit for all questions and answers. Are there any questions from the public about a decision made by council at the meeting today? If so, please come forward. State your name.
My name is Sylvia. I'm a resident of Ward 3 on the snow removal issue. One of the issues is the city needs to get to more consistent messaging for snow. I have reported instances where there's snow on the sidewalk and it's blocking a bus shelter and there's snow in the bus shelter. I call 311 and they say, well, we can take care of the snow outside, but we have to transfer to Brampton, they can address it on the inside. And the trash bin that's overflowing, that's a different department, and so that's a separate ticket. And so, well, the trash that's overflowing on the sidewalk and behind it, well, that's the region's issue, so you'll have to transfer to the region for that. When you have that many levels, it becomes very difficult and time-consuming for residents to address stuff. On snow removal, the city has sidewalks as one thing, but there's different tiers of sidewalks. Some are barely used and some are extremely busy. As Councilors Medeiros and Bowman know, the sidewalks by Sheridan College are quite busy, but currently they're just with general sidewalks and dead-end areas that barely get used. on the housing issue, I'm
Is
someone.
there questions out of this?
So here's my question. So you've talked about in the workshop, talking with contractors about improving the service, but what is the city doing to address the consistent messaging? Because this is something the city can work on that does not necessarily involve waiting until next year and does not involve vast amounts of money for changing contracts.
So good, I think would that be to you, Acting Commissioner Joe Bottari, I believe.
This was one of the items that was identified, to the chair, this was one of the identified items as part of the dialogue as it pertained to coming back to the workshop and looking at those levels of service as it what was impacting some of our transit stops as well. So this would be part of that follow-up, and that information can be provided back.
Okay, good, thank you.
Okay, on housing, I know you've all talked about affordable housing, and that's definitely an issue. I'm someone in my 20s who lives at home, and I've tried to look at moving out. The issue isn't the lack of affordable housing, it's just a lack of housing. You can talk about affordable housing, but the city's never going to be able to meet all of the demands. There's physically not enough housing at any price. If I had $2,000 a month, I could probably find something, but the reason they can charge that is because, well, you've got 5 options. They can effectively act like a cartel because you don't have any choices. If you're stuck in an old building that's in terrible shape, well, you can complain to landlords like, what are you going to do about it? Where are you going to move? Because you don't have a choice. You're stuck. So at the development meetings, people come to the development meetings and they complain about these tall buildings because, oh, the shadows. What you need to do as councilors is explain, look, we need housing that is smaller units, 0, 1, and 2 bedroom units. We can either have them in the buildings or they can live in basements in your neighborhoods, and we're getting complaints about that. Which is more important to you, fixing the trash in the cars or shadows? And when you have an actual discrete building, the planning department actually gets to review things like impact on traffic and trash and parking and all of that stuff. So when you work on actually building housing, you can address a lot of these issues. There is not enough housing, so people have figured out ways to cope to deal with major shortages. If you look at rental housing, there's 4,000 units, according to CMHC, for rental housing. Less than that from 2017. And there's 83,000 people are between 20 and 29. This is not even remotely close to enough. A lot of these condo buildings for the smaller units.
Are you getting to a question? We know
Yes,
we have a
my
problem.
question is, you are talking about affordable housing. What I want to know is what you're doing to fix the underlying housing issue. There is a huge crisis, and the city is talking about affordable housing, but it's not addressing on the underlying, there's just shortages in general.
I don't know who wants to take this one. Maybe the acting.
Through you, Acting Mayor, I don't know that I have a clear answer, but I do know that we are responding to provincial consultation on housing availability and affordability. I do know that there are some major underlying changes that we're expecting to see in 2019 to the approvals process and the planning process in general that is intended to speed up the availability of housing stock across the board, not just rental or affordable housing. So we do know that there are significant changes underway. We're not sure at this point in time exactly what they look like or any of the details around them. The consultation is closing, I believe. Our last date for comments on some of the consultations are February the 28th. I know you'll be seeing a report next week specifically related to the growth plan. There is a meeting happening at the ministry today with respect to affordable housing with the parliamentary assistant at the Ministry of Municipal Affairs on Bay Street. So I'll have a bit of an update after that meeting, but there will be significant changes to the regulatory system in 2019 that should allow us to speed up the process.
Thank you.
And what is the city doing to address the underlying cost? The city, so the region is the province is talking about developer charges, but there are substantial costs built in depending on where you are. For a bachelor unit, the city requirements for the parking, could add 75 grand out of 300 grand for a condo unit. So if you reduce that by putting it by transit, congratulations, you just reduced the cost by a quarter without actually costing the city anything. And if you build it by transit, so I don't need a car, well, I just saved $1,000 a month. So I get a unit that's $400 cheaper and I save $1,000 for a car. These are the kind of costs that really add up. What could you do with $1,400 extra in your pocket? Is this a sizable amount of money to someone who's probably living on less than 40 grand a year before taxes? So what are you doing to address the city's costs that are not development charges? Because the province is mostly focusing on just development charges.
Take another stab at that, Rick?
Well, I can, through you, acting mayor, I'm sorry. The one thing I can comment on is that, the majority of the tall buildings that are slated to be developed in Brampton are along transit lines. We are doing a comprehensive zoning bylaw review at the moment that is considering the ratio of parking to units for that type of housing. So there may be reduced costs that can be passed on to the homeowner. And that will rely heavily on whether or not the developer can do that. So that's all I can offer, I think, at this point.
Councillor, did you want to go?
Yes, to you, Acting Mayor. This is a very complex issue when we talk about housing. Housing in and of itself is neither affordable or unaffordable. There are a number of factors that influence the cost and the impact. It is not something that is within the realm of pure control for our municipality. The fact that in terms of the delegate's question, in terms of how planning could be done in a way that provides people the opportunity to be close to transit and not require a car, that is an option that is given to an individual. That does not prevent them from wanting to have a car and wanting that parking spot. So at the end of the day, there are a number of different factors at play. We have some opportunities to influence direction, and I think through our acting commissioner's comments, we will continue to do that and work with our development industry to offer more affordable choices, but not in and of itself affordable housing items, because those require a significant level of due diligence, working with CMHC and the province to get rent-geared to income houses available, and in addition to that, then finding developers who want to build those and then maintain them. So we will do what we can as we continue to do. We have a council that is committed to ensuring that we have options in our community. We will continue to do that.
Thank you, Commissioner Plary. Thank you. We are now at section 20, bylaws. We are now at the portion of the meeting dealing with the adoption of city bylaws to give effect to council decisions made at this meeting and previous meetings. I have a motion from, they don't have a motion on this one, do they? Just, not on bylaws, we just got confirming bylaw. That was confirming bylaws. Oh, sorry. We have a motion from Councillor Bowman, seconded by Councillor Palashi, that bylaw 46-2019 before council at its meeting February 20th, 2019 be given the required number of readings taken as read and signed by the mayor and city clerk and the corporate seal affixed thereto. All in favor? Carried, thank you. Okay, now the next item, I believe, and we're in the closed session. Okay, yeah. On the closed session, there's minutes from previous council meetings. I believe Council Palashi is moving that we don't go into close, we just move the minutes. All in favor? Everybody's good? Thank you very much. That carries. I guess the next item is the confirming bylaws. Our next item of business is item 22, confirming bylaw. I have a motion from Councillor Palashi, seconded by Councillor Bowman, to approve the confirming bylaws preceding decisions from this meeting. All those in favor? That carries. Thank you. And our last item of business is item 23, adjournment. Thank you, members, for your respectful consideration and decisions today, and thank you, staff, for your information and advice. Our next meeting is Wednesday, March 6, 2019 at 9:30. And the next meeting after that is March 20th, 2019. And I'm anticipating that we will be held in the refreshed new council chambers on City Hall 4th floor. I have a motion by Councillor Williams, seconded by Councillor Singh to do adjourn today's meeting. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. Meeting is adjourned.